This is our family's biggest embarrassment, my mom said as she introduced me to my sister's fiance, a Navy SEAL commander. They all chuckled. He shook my hand, then paused. His eyes snapped open. He stepped back and gave a full salute. Admiral Hayes, ma'am. My entire family froze. My name is Rebecca Hayes, and for 15 years, my family has believed I'm a low level IT worker who plays with computers in some Navy basement. My sister Emma was marrying Commander Jake Morrison, a decorated SEAL who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, I was the family disappointment who couldn't even get a real job. What they didn't know was that I'm actually Rear Admiral Rebecca Hayes, Director of Naval Intelligence Operations, the woman who authorizes the missions that Jake and his team execute, the woman whose official portrait hangs in the chain of command at every SEAL base in the country. I'd kept my real identity secret for operational security, but when Jake recognized me at Emma's engagement party, everything changed. Because sometimes the family embarrassment turns out to be the person everyone else salutes. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply letting the truth speak for itself. The engagement party was being held at the Charleston Country Club, the same venue where my family had celebrated every major milestone for the past 20 years. The same place where they'd thrown elaborate celebrations for Emma's high school valedictorian speech, her college graduation summa cum laude, and her promotion to senior marketing director at a Fortune 500 company. The same place where they'd never thought to celebrate a single one of my achievements, because as far as they knew, I didn't have any worth celebrating. I arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, wearing the navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for occasions where I needed to look respectable but unremarkable. After 15 years of maintaining operational security, blending into civilian social situations had become second nature. What I walked into would prove that some family dynamics never change, no matter how much you accomplish. The country club's main ballroom was decorated in elegant navy and gold, Emma's colors chosen to complement her fiancé's military service. About 60 guests mingled around cocktail tables, a mix of family, college friends, and what appeared to be several of Jake's SEAL teammates, easily identifiable by their bearing and the way they unconsciously maintained tactical awareness of room entrances. Rebecca! Mom's voice carried across the room with the kind of forced enthusiasm she reserved for acknowledging me in public. There you are, sweetie. Come meet some people. I made my way over to where she stood with Dad, Uncle Tom, and Aunt Patricia, the family power structure that had ruled every gathering since I was old enough to understand social hierarchies. Everyone, this is Emma's sister, Rebecca, Mom announced to a small group of Emma's college friends. She works with computers for the Navy. Very technical. The dismissive tone that revealed exactly how my family saw my life's work. Oh, how interesting, said a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a Chanel bag. Are you in IT support? My husband says military computer systems are always breaking down. Something like that, I replied diplomatically, the same response I'd been giving for 15 years. Dad jumped in with his usual attempt at humor. Becca fixes printers and updates software. Not as glamorous as Emma's marketing campaigns, but someone has to keep the computers running, right? The group laughed politely, and I smiled along like I had countless times before. Let them think I spent my days troubleshooting email problems and replacing toner cartridges. It was safer for everyone that way. But what happened when Emma arrived with Jake would test my ability to maintain my cover. There's the happy couple, Aunt Patricia squealed as Emma and Jake entered the ballroom hand in hand. Emma looked radiant in a flowing emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair perfectly. She'd always been the beauty of the family, the one who turned heads and commanded attention effortlessly. Jake stood beside her in his Navy dress uniform, every inch the decorated war hero my family believed him to be. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of quiet intensity that marked someone who'd seen combat. His chest displayed an impressive array of ribbons and medals that spoke to years of distinguished service in special operations. As they approached our group, I felt the familiar tension of being in proximity to someone who might recognize me. Jake, eat honey, Mom said, beaming with the kind of pride she'd never shown for my accomplishments. I want you to meet the rest of the family. This is my other daughter, Rebecca. Jake turned toward me with the polite smile of someone fulfilling social obligations. His hand extended for a handshake, his eyes meeting mine with casual friendliness. Then everything changed. The moment of recognition that would shatter 15 years of carefully maintained secrecy. Jake's expression shifted so quickly it was like watching someone flip a switch. The polite smile vanished, replaced by something approaching shock. His hand, halfway to mine, froze in midair. Ma'am, he said, his voice suddenly formal, respectful in a way that made everyone around us take notice. But he didn't complete the handshake. Instead, he took a half step back, his posture straightening into something that was unmistakably military bearing. What Jake did next would destroy my cover and change everything forever. Admiral Hayes, he said clearly, his voice carrying across the immediate area. Ma'am. And then he saluted. A full, crisp military salute, held with the precision of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and why. The effect on our small group was immediate and profound. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The polite social chatter died as if someone had turned off a switch. I'm sorry, Mom said with a confused laugh. I think there's been some mistake. This is Rebecca, Emma's sister. She works in IT. Jake held the salute for another beat before dropping his hand, but his posture remained at attention and his eyes never left mine. Mrs. Hayes, he said to my mother, though he was still looking at me. With respect, ma'am, this is Rear Admiral Rebecca Hayes, Director of Naval Intelligence Operations, Pacific Fleet. If you've ever had a moment where your entire family's understanding of who you are got turned upside down, you know the feeling in that room right now. Have you ever kept a major secret from your family to protect them? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. The silence that followed Jake's words was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop 3 tables away. Emma's college friends stood frozen with their cocktails halfway to their lips. Dad's mouth was actually hanging open. Uncle Tom looked like he was trying to solve a mathematical equation that didn't make sense. But it was Mom's face that really captured the magnitude of what had just happened. She was staring at Jake like he'd started speaking a foreign language, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like panic. That's that's not possible, she said finally. Rebecca works with computers. She doesn't. Ma'am, Jake said respectfully. Admiral Hayes is the senior intelligence officer responsible for all naval operations in the Pacific Theater. Her picture is displayed in the chain of command at every major naval installation on the West Coast. Emma, who'd been silent through this entire exchange, finally found her voice. Jake, what are you talking about? This is my sister, Becca. She fixes computers for the Navy. The moment when Jake would have to choose between respecting my cover and honoring military protocol. Jake looked at me and I could see the question in his eyes. He was asking permission, in the way that military personnel learn to read unspoken commands from their superiors. I gave him the slightest nod. Emma, Jake said gently, I've been briefed by Admiral Hayes personally. I've received mission orders with her signature. She's one of the highest-ranking intelligence officers in the Pacific Fleet. But that's impossible, Dad interjected. She lives in a little apartment in Norfolk. She drives a 10-year-old Honda. She doesn't even have a Facebook account. Sir, Jake replied, senior intelligence officers maintain minimal digital footprints for operational security, and Admiral Hayes's living arrangements would be appropriate to her cover requirements. The explanation that was starting to make my family realize how little they actually knew about my life. More people were gathering around us now, drawn by the unusual sight of a Navy SEAL standing at attention in the middle of a cocktail party. Emma's friends, family members, other military personnel at the party, all of them trying to understand what was happening. Rebecca, Mom said, her voice smaller now, uncertain. Is this true? For 15 years, I'd deflected this question, dodged around it, maintained my cover through misdirection and careful half-truths. But Jake's recognition had blown that operational security wide open, and there was no going back. The moment when I'd have to decide whether to maintain my lie or embrace the truth. Yes, Mom, I said quietly. It's true. The admission hit the group like a physical force. Emma actually took a step backward. Dad made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. You're telling me, Uncle Tom said slowly, that you're actually some kind of admiral? Rear Admiral, Jake corrected automatically. Two-star flag officer. Admiral Hayes outranks every officer at my base except the base commander. But you told us you worked in IT, Aunt Patricia protested. You said you did computer support. I said I worked with computers, I corrected gently. I never specified in what capacity. If this level of family deception is blowing your mind, hit that like button because what Rebecca reveals about her real job will make your jaw drop even further. Emma was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Becca, what exactly do you do? I mean, what do you actually do? I looked around the circle of family members who'd spent 15 years treating me like the family failure and made a decision that would change everything forever. I authorize and coordinate special operations throughout the Pacific region. I brief the Secretary of Defense on intelligence matters affecting national security. I make strategic decisions about naval deployments that affect global maritime operations. You make decisions about my missions, Jake added. Admiral Hayes has been my ultimate commanding officer for the past 3 years. The revelation that would make my family understand the scope of what they'd been dismissing. That's why you travel so much, Emma said suddenly, pieces clicking into place. All those work trips we thought were IT conferences, Pentagon briefings, NATO intelligence summits, strategic planning sessions with allied naval forces. And the weird hours, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. We always wondered why you worked such strange schedules. Global operations don't follow Eastern Standard Time, I replied. When it's 3 a.m. here, it's 4 p.m. in the South China Sea. Mom was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part awe, part confusion, and part something that looked like fear. Rebecca, why didn't you tell us? All these years we thought. We've been treating you like the family failure, I finished. Like the daughter who couldn't get a real job. Like the embarrassment you had to explain to your friends. The truth that none of them could deny because they'd all participated in it. But we didn't know, Emma protested. How could we know if you didn't tell us? Emma, would it have mattered? Would you have treated me differently if you'd known my rank instead of my character? The question hung in the air because we all knew the answer. Ma'am, Jake said, addressing me with the formal tone he'd use in a military briefing. If I may ask, why the operational cover with your family? It was a fair question, and one that deserved an honest answer. Family members of senior intelligence officers are potential targets for foreign operatives, I explained. The less my family knew about my real position, the safer they were from people who might try to use them to get to me. But what I said next would reveal the personal cost of protecting people who'd never protected me. And honestly, I continued, looking around the circle of shocked faces, it was easier to let you think I was a failure than to constantly defend achievements you'd never understand or respect. The brutally honest admission hit them like a slap. Several family members flinched visibly. That's not fair, Mom said defensively. We would have been proud of you if we'd known. Would you? Because for 15 years, you've been telling people I'm the daughter who works with computers in a basement somewhere. You've introduced me as your technical daughter, like technology was somehow less valuable than Emma's marketing work. Rebecca, that's not what we meant. It's exactly what you meant, Mom. You've spent my entire adult life treating me like I'm less successful, less important, less worthy of respect than Emma. The only difference is, now you know why that assessment was wrong. The confrontation that 15 years of hidden resentment had been building toward. Emma, who'd been quiet through most of this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Becca, I need to understand something. When I got engaged to Jake, when we started planning this party, you knew who he was, didn't you? I knew Commander Morrison by reputation, yes. You knew I was marrying someone you professionally outrank. Among other things, yes. And you never said anything. You let Mom and Dad talk about how Jake was so successful, how I was marrying such an accomplished man, how he was everything you'd never be. the moment when Emma realized the scope of the irony in their family dynamic. Emma, Jake is an exceptional officer and an honorable man. Your engagement to him isn't diminished by my rank. But all those conversations where they compared us, where they talked about how I was the successful daughter and you were the disappointment, were based on incomplete information, I said diplomatically. Jake, who'd been listening to this family drama unfold, finally spoke up again. If I may, Admiral, the successful completion of Operation Neptune's Trident last year was directly attributable to your strategic coordination. What's Operation Neptune's Trident? Dad asked. Classified, Jake and I said simultaneously. But I can say, Jake continued, that Admiral Hayes' decisions during that operation saved American lives and prevented a significant international incident. If you're realizing how many people in your life might have secret depths you've never recognized, smash that subscribe button because what happens when Rebecca's real achievements come to light will change everything. Uncle Tom, who'd been silent through most of the revelations, suddenly laughed. Not with humor, but with something closer to hysteria. Do you realize, he said to no one in particular, that we've been patronizing a two-star admiral? We've been treating a senior military officer like she's our family charity case? Thomas, Aunt Patricia hissed, clearly mortified. No, Patricia, this is actually hilarious. Remember last Christmas when we all pitched in to buy Rebecca that nice professional outfit because we thought she needed help looking more successful? The memory hit the group like another bombshell. I remembered that Christmas gift, a conservative pantsuit from Macy's that they'd presented with speeches about helping me project more authority in the workplace. Oh, God, Mom whispered, the full scope of their condescension finally hitting her. Rebecca, we've been so patronizing, dismissive, condescending, I suggested. Yes, you have been. But you let us, Emma said, and there was something like accusation in her voice. You let us think you were less successful than you are. The blame shifting that would prove my family still didn't understand their role in this dynamic. Emma, I maintained operational cover for national security purposes. What's your excuse for 15 years of treating me like I was inferior? The question silenced her completely. Jake, meanwhile, was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding around him. As a military officer, he was trained to maintain composure, but this situation was clearly outside his area of expertise. Admiral, he said formally, if you prefer, I can clarify the situation for the other guests. I looked around the ballroom, where groups of people were clearly speculating about what they'd witnessed. Word was spreading that something significant had happened, but most people didn't understand what. What I decided to do next would determine whether my cover could ever be rebuilt or if this exposure was permanent. No, Commander, I said. I think enough has been clarified for one evening. But even as I said it, I knew there was no going back. Jake's public recognition had ended 15 years of careful operational security. Within hours, everyone at this party would know that the family disappointment was actually one of the Navy's senior intelligence officers. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it was oddly liberating. Ladies and gentlemen, came a voice from the small stage, where a DJ had been set up. If I could have your attention, please. The announcement that would force me to face the consequences of my exposure in front of 60 witnesses. It was Emma, who had apparently decided this moment needed some kind of public address. She stood at the microphone in her emerald dress, looking every inch the poised marketing executive she was. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Jake and my engagement, she began, her voice carrying that professional confidence she'd developed over years of corporate presentations. Before we continue with the evening's festivities, I think there's something important that needs to be shared with all of you. I felt my stomach drop. Emma was about to announce my real identity to the entire party. The moment when my private family drama was about to become a very public revelation. Many of you know my sister Rebecca, Emma continued, gesturing toward where I stood frozen in the crowd. What you may not know is that Rebecca has been keeping a very important secret from our family for many years. The ballroom had gone completely quiet. 60 pairs of eyes were focused on the stage, and I could feel the weight of their attention shifting toward me. Rebecca is not just my sister, Emma announced. She's also Rear Admiral Rebecca Hayes, one of the most senior intelligence officers in the United States Navy. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Gasps, exclamations, the sound of someone dropping a glass. Jake's SEAL teammates, who'd clearly recognized the significance of his earlier salute, began applauding. But what Emma said next would prove she still didn't understand the implications of what she'd just done. So, I'd like everyone to join me in congratulating Rebecca on her incredible achievements and thanking her for her service to our country. The applause that followed was enthusiastic but awkward, the kind of response you get when people don't quite understand what they're applauding but know they should be supportive. I stood there accepting the recognition, smiling and nodding appropriately while inside, I was calculating the security implications of having my real identity announced to a room full of civilians, some of whom I didn't know and couldn't vet. Have you ever had someone expose your private information in public, thinking they were helping you? The feeling of losing control over your own story is devastating. Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone else who's been through the same thing. Jake appeared at my side, his expression serious. Admiral, we need to discuss security protocols, he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. Agreed, I replied. This exposure will require immediate notification to naval intelligence. Ma'am, if I may suggest, you should probably limit your contact with civilian networks until security can be reassessed. The professional reality that would give me the perfect excuse to cut toxic people out of my life forever. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 15 years, I'd protected my family by keeping them ignorant of my real position. Now their ignorance and Emma's impulsive public announcement had created a security situation that would require me to distance myself from them anyway. As the party continued around us with people approaching to offer congratulations and ask questions I couldn't answer, I realized that this night had changed everything in ways my family couldn't begin to understand. They'd gotten their wish to know who I really was, but they were about to learn that some truths come with consequences they never anticipated. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply letting people face the natural results of their own actions. The evening was far from over, but I already knew how it would end. Not with reconciliation or family healing, but with professional protocols that would protect national security while coincidentally protecting me from people who'd never truly valued who I was. Sometimes the best protection comes not from hiding who you are, but from being exactly who you're supposed to be, regardless of whether other people understand or approve. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal blur of congratulations from strangers, awkward family conversations, and the growing realization that my 15 years of operational security had been permanently compromised in the span of 5 minutes. Jake stayed close, partially out of military courtesy to a senior officer, but mostly because he understood the security implications of what had just happened better than anyone else in the room. Admiral, he said quietly as we stood near the bar, I need to apologize for compromising your cover. I should have maintained operational discretion, regardless of the circumstances. Commander Morrison, you responded appropriately to recognizing a superior officer. The failure was in my family's public announcement, not your military protocol. But what Jake told me next would reveal just how badly this exposure could affect both our careers. Ma'am, there's something you should know. 3 of my teammates are here tonight, and at least 2 civilians have already asked me for details about your position. Word is going to spread beyond this room. I looked around the ballroom, noting the small clusters of people engaged in intense conversations, phones occasionally appearing as people texted or took photos. In the age of social media, nothing stayed private for long. How quickly do you estimate this information will reach unofficial channels? Hours, not days, Jake replied grimly. And Admiral, there's something else. My fiancé? He glanced toward Emma, who was surrounded by a group of her college friends, all of them talking animatedly. She's very active on social media. This could be on Instagram by midnight. The nightmare scenario that would force me to make the most difficult decision of my military career. Commander, I need you to do something for me. Yes, ma'am. I need you to speak with Emma privately. Explain to her that any social media posts about tonight's revelations could compromise active military operations and endanger personnel in the field. Ma'am, are you asking me to lie to my fiancé? I'm asking you to tell her the truth about operational security. Whether she chooses to believe it's serious enough to modify her behavior is up to her. Jake nodded, understanding the delicate balance I was asking him to maintain between military duty and personal relationships. As he moved toward Emma, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find Dad standing behind me, his expression more serious than I'd seen since my grandfather's funeral. Rebecca, we need to talk. Privately. The conversation that would determine whether any relationship with my family could survive this revelation. We found a quiet corner near the club's library, away from the party noise and curious guests. Dad closed the door behind us and leaned against it, as if he was afraid someone might interrupt. 32 years, he said without preamble. I've been your father for 32 years, and I never knew who you really were. Dad! No, let me finish. I need to say this. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from childhood when he was struggling with difficult concepts. I've spent the last hour thinking about every conversation we've had since you joined the Navy. Every time I made jokes about your computer work. Every time your mother and I compared you unfavorably to Emma. The reckoning that I'd both dreaded and hoped for since my cover was blown. Do you remember last Thanksgiving? Dad continued. When Uncle Frank was bragging about his son making lieutenant colonel, and I said at least Emma was successful in the real world because you were just pushing papers? I remembered. It had stung then, and the memory still stung now. Dad, you didn't know. That's just it, Rebecca. I didn't know because I never bothered to ask. I never asked what kind of computer work you did. I never asked why you traveled so much. I never asked why you seemed to know so much about international affairs when the news came on. He moved to the window, looking out at the golf course where he'd spent countless Saturday mornings instead of spending time understanding his daughters' lives. I realized tonight that I've been proud of the wrong things for 15 years. I've been bragging about Emma's marketing campaigns while my other daughter was making decisions that affect national security. The admission that revealed how deeply my father's assumptions had shaped his perception of success. Dad, Emma's achievements are real and valuable. My career doesn't diminish hers. But our treatment of you diminished both of you. We taught Emma that her value came from being better than you, and we taught you that your accomplishments didn't matter to us. The insight was more perceptive than I'd expected from a man who'd spent decades avoiding uncomfortable family conversations. What I don't understand, Dad continued, is why you protected us. Why you let us think you were less successful than you were. Because the alternative was putting you in danger. Family members of senior intelligence officers are legitimate targets for foreign operatives who want leverage. But that's not the only reason, is it? The question that would force me to confront the personal pain beneath the professional justification. I was quiet for a long moment, weighing how much honesty our relationship could handle. No, I said finally. It wasn't the only reason. What was the other reason? Because it was easier than constantly proving my worth to people who'd already decided I was the lesser daughter. The words hung between us like an accusation, which I suppose they were. Dad sat down heavily in one of the library chairs, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. Rebecca, what can we do to fix this? I don't know if it can be fixed, Dad. 15 years of a fundamental misunderstanding of who I am isn't something you can apologize away in one conversation. But we want to try. Your mother is devastated. Emma is confused and hurt. We all want to understand how we got this so wrong. The request that would test whether I believed people could truly change their deepest assumptions. Before I could answer, there was a knock on the library door. Jake's voice came through the wood. Admiral, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention. I opened the door to find Jake standing with his phone in hand, his expression grim. What's the situation, Commander? Ma'am, my commanding officer at Coronado just called. Photos from tonight's party are already circulating on social media. Your identity has been compromised across multiple platforms. Dad, who had followed me to the door, went pale. What does that mean? Jake looked to me for permission before answering. I nodded. Sir, it means that Admiral Hayes's cover identity has been blown on a scale that threatens operational security. This isn't just a family dinner conversation anymore. This is a potential national security incident. The escalation that would transform a personal family drama into a professional crisis. Jake, I said, my voice taking on the command tone I used in Pentagon briefings. What's the current assessment of exposure level? Ma'am, preliminary reports indicate photos and videos from tonight have been shared on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Someone filmed your sister's announcement. The hashtag #OurAdmiralSister is already trending in naval communities. The irony was staggering. Emma's attempt to publicly honor me had created exactly the kind of security exposure I'd spent 15 years preventing. Commander, I need you to contact your security officer. Immediately. Full briefing, emergency protocols. This is now a classified matter. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there's one more thing. What? The base commander wants to speak with you personally, tonight. The phone call that would determine the future of my military career. I looked at Dad, who was standing frozen in the doorway, clearly overwhelmed by the rapid escalation of consequences. Dad, I need to handle this. We'll have to continue our conversation later. Rebecca, wait. What does this mean? Are you in trouble? It means that my family's good intentions may have just ended my ability to serve in intelligence operations. The weight of that statement hit him like a physical blow. Oh God, Rebecca, this is our fault. This is the consequence of exposure. Fault is less important than damage control right now. But what the base commander told me during that phone call would change everything I thought I knew about my future. I found a private office upstairs and called Admiral Patricia Chen, my direct superior, and one of only 3 people who knew the full scope of my cover operations. Rebecca. Her voice was crisp, professional, but I could hear the underlying concern. I've been briefed on tonight's incident. How bad is the exposure? Complete compromise, ma'am. Public announcement at a civilian gathering, social media dissemination, multiple witnesses with unknown security clearances. Are you safe? Is there any indication of foreign interest or hostile surveillance? No immediate threats assessed, Admiral, but my operational cover is irreparably compromised. There was a pause that lasted long enough for me to wonder if we'd been disconnected. Rebecca, I'm going to tell you something that will surprise you. We've been expecting this. The revelation that would prove the Navy had been planning for this scenario longer than I'd realized. Ma'am, your cover identity was always a temporary measure. We've been preparing for your transition to a more visible role for the past 6 months. I don't understand. The Pentagon has been developing a new position, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence for Public Operations. Essentially, a role that allows senior intelligence officers to operate openly while maintaining appropriate security protocols. I sat down hard in the office chair, trying to process what she was telling me. Are you saying that my exposure tonight might actually facilitate a career advancement? I'm saying that your exposure tonight removes the final barrier to a promotion we've been planning since your last performance review. The twist that would transform my family's accidental betrayal into an unexpected opportunity. Admiral Chen, what exactly are you offering me? A 3-star position based at the Pentagon. Public profile, but with security protections for your family. No more cover identities, no more pretending to be someone you're not. And my family, their safety, will be managed through officials, channels rather than secrecy. Rebecca, you've sacrificed 15 years of family relationships to protect people who never understood the sacrifice you were making. It's time for that to end. As I hung up the phone, I realized that tonight's disaster might actually be the best thing that had ever happened to my career. When I returned to the party, I found my family huddled in an anxious group near the bar, clearly waiting for news about the consequences of Emma's announcement. Rebecca! Mom rushed over the moment she saw me. Are you in trouble? Are we in trouble? Jake said something about national security. Nobody's in trouble, Mom, but there are going to be some changes. Emma appeared at Mom's shoulder, her earlier confidence replaced by obvious anxiety. Becca, I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping. I thought people should know how successful you really are. Emma, your intentions were good, but good intentions don't mitigate security consequences. What kind of consequences? Dad asked. I looked around at my family, these people who'd spent 15 years underestimating me, who'd accidentally compromised my cover in their attempt to finally show me respect, who were now genuinely frightened that their ignorance might have damaged my career. What I told them next would change our family dynamic forever. The consequences are that I'm being promoted to a position where I won't need to hide who I am anymore. Three-star Admiral, Pentagon assignment, public profile. The relief on their faces was immediate and profound. So, you're not in trouble? Mom asked. I'm being rewarded for 15 years of exceptional service, some of which you accidentally made public tonight. Uncle Tom, who'd been quietly listening to this conversation, suddenly laughed. So, Emma's Instagram announcement accidentally got you promoted? Emma's announcement forced a career transition that was already in development. The timing was accelerated, not created. But what I said next would establish the boundaries for our future relationship. However, I continued, this promotion comes with new security requirements that will affect how I interact with civilian contacts. What kind of requirements? Emma asked nervously. Background checks for anyone in my personal circle. Security briefings for family members. Monitoring of social media activity. Regular interviews with security personnel. The list was real, though not as restrictive as I was making it sound. But my family didn't need to know that. Are you saying we have to be investigated to be part of your life? Dad asked. I'm saying that if you want to be part of my life going forward, you'll need to understand that my career involves responsibilities that affect national security. That means thinking before you post photos, considering consequences before you make announcements, and accepting that some aspects of my work will always be classified. The conditions that would test whether my family valued me enough to accept the requirements that came with knowing who I really was. Mom nodded immediately. Of course, honey, whatever you need. Emma was more hesitant. Becca, some of those requirements sound pretty invasive. Do we really need all that just to be family? Emma, you just compromised a 15-year intelligence operation by announcing my identity on social media. Yes, we really need protocols to prevent that from happening again. The bluntness of my response made her flinch, but it was a conversation we needed to have. I need all of you to understand something, I continued. For 15 years, I've protected you by keeping you ignorant. Going forward, I'll protect you by keeping you informed, but only if you're willing to accept the responsibilities that come with that information. 3 months later, I stood in the Pentagon's main briefing room, delivering my first public intelligence assessment as Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence for Public Operations. My family sat in the gallery, all of them having completed security clearances that allowed them to attend selected public briefings. They'd passed their background checks, completed their security training, and learned to navigate the unique requirements of being connected to a senior intelligence officer. The transformation in our relationships had been remarkable. Mom had started asking intelligent questions about international affairs. Dad had begun reading defense journals to better understand my work. Emma had become genuinely interested in the strategic implications of naval operations. But the most significant change was in how they saw me. After the briefing, as we gathered for a family dinner at a restaurant near the Pentagon, Mom raised her glass of wine. To Rebecca, she said, who we always knew was special but never understood was extraordinary. Mom, you didn't always know I was special. You thought I was the family disappointment. No, she replied firmly. We thought we understood what success looked like, and we were wrong, but we never stopped loving you even when we failed to appreciate you. The distinction that would allow us to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of truth rather than assumptions. Emma had been quieter during dinner, clearly still processing the dramatic changes in our family dynamic. Finally, she looked across the table at me. Becca, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you forgive us for all the years of treating you like you were less successful than you were? I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness wasn't something that happened instantly, but understanding was a good start. I forgive you for not knowing better, I said. But I also need you to understand that words like disappointment and embarrassment have consequences, even when the person saying them doesn't know the full story. I understand, Emma said quietly, and I'm sorry it took a public humiliation for us to learn how to respect you properly. 2 years later, Emma and Jake's wedding was held at the Naval Academy Chapel in Annapolis, with full military honors and a reception attended by senior officers from across the fleet. I walked Emma down the aisle in my dress whites, my 3 stars gleaming on my shoulders, representing a family that had finally learned to value truth over assumptions. If this incredible journey of hidden identity, family growth, and ultimate respect has moved you, absolutely crush that like button and subscribe for more amazing stories of people who proved that sometimes the biggest disappointments turn out to be the greatest successes. Share in the comments about a time when someone underestimated you. Your story might inspire someone else who's being overlooked right now. In her wedding speech, Emma told the story of how she'd almost married a Navy SEAL without realizing her sister outranked him. The room erupted in laughter, but it was warm laughter, celebrating the irony rather than mocking anyone's ignorance. The healing that proved people can change their deepest assumptions when they're willing to face uncomfortable truths about themselves. As I watched Jake and Emma dance their first dance as husband and wife, I reflected on the journey from that disastrous engagement party to this moment of genuine family celebration. My family had learned that success comes in many forms, not all of them visible or easily understood. They'd learned that assumptions about people's worth are often wrong and that love should be based on character rather than achievements. But most importantly, they'd learned that the people you underestimate might turn out to be the people you need to respect the most. The girl who spent 15 years being called the family embarrassment had become the family's greatest source of pride. Not because my rank made me more valuable as a person, but because my family had finally learned to see value that had always been there. The lesson that respect isn't something you earn through rank or title. It's something you deserve simply for being committed to excellence, regardless of whether other people understand what excellence looks like in your field. Today, my family understands that every person they meet might be carrying achievements they can't see, fighting battles they don't understand, or contributing to the world in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Because sometimes the most powerful transformation isn't becoming someone different, it's finally being seen for who you've always been. The admiral who revealed her identity to protect her family's feelings learned that the most important mission isn't the one you complete in secret. It's the one that helps the people you love become better than they were before. And that's not revenge, that's education. And sometimes that education changes everything for everyone involved.